If you're in the middle of an active shooter, Countermeasure Consulting implores you to do three things. You want to react. You want to understand something is happening. You want to escape. You want to get out of the building at all costs, and you want to survive. You want to do that for you, your family, and for others.
We cannot rely on the stupidity of our enemies because our enemies are resourceful, they're bright, and fight unfairly.
The active shooter probably has plenty of ammunition. The active shooter has plenty of magazines.
If we sit back and take the attitude of it'll never happen here, you've already lost. You've already become the sheep.
On the national average, it takes law enforcement 14 minutes to arrive.
Those 14 minutes are going to make a big difference between how many lives you're going to save versus how many are going to get lost.
An active shooter is an individual who is going in to cause a great deal of harm to a group of people. The term shooter implies a firearm, but actually that's not one of the key components. And they will almost always choose the most vulnerable populations to go after.
They are not a new phenomenon. There's no geographic region that is excluded. Males account for approximately 75% of all offenders. 50% of attacks take place in under 12 minutes. 48% of incidents end by force, whether it's by police or citizens.
I think trying to profile an active shooter is like trying to profile a drunk driver. There are lots of reasons why people drive drunk, and it's really not relevant if you're on the receiving end. I'm more focused on what they do, because what they do has some consistencies. Why they do it has a variety of reasons, and unfortunately we have seen that.
Usually they feel that someone has wronged them and they are trying to make it right by violence of action.
We have had people who've had some severe mental illness, or they have felt left out and they've decided to make a name for themselves.
And that's the only similarities that we can find so far.
That's why I prefer to talk a little bit about what they do. We do know that some of the best predictors of behavior is what people say they're going to do. So if someone says that they are going to commit a violent act, I would take them at their word and I would call the police. Most people who have violent fantasies do not act on them. Now you start putting things together. They have fantasies, they start writing down those fantasies, then they start collecting firearms and ammunition and come up with a plan of people they're going to kill. That's taking action. 3 words I'd like you to remember are react, escape, and survive. React to the threat, escape from the threat so that you can survive. Must do something. We spend a lot of time and trouble training people to do fire drills to get out of a building. So if you think about that with all the emphasis that we give to fire drills and how deadly fires are, you see the challenge involved in getting people to recognize the threat with an active shooter.
If you hear gunfire, if you see gunfire, you may have some risks in your brain that you are trying to process in slow motion. You need to train your paradigm. If I think I hear a gunshot, I'm going to get up and I'm going to leave.
How do you train people to react in a way that's effective under high levels of stress?
Some people, they just don't know what they don't know, unless you've been in these situations before. You just don't know how you're going to react.
Even though in situations that are oftentimes openly perilous on their face, we're still surprised when something bad happened to us.
You know, in times of stress, you're going to rise to the threat. Well, you know, studies show time and time again, you don't rise to the threat, you default to your level of training. So under stress, if you're going to default to your level of training, you better make sure you have the best training possible.
If you remember nothing else, you must do something. People don't necessarily want to react. Let me not rush into this. Let me just see what's happening. This has never happened before. There's got to be something else going on.
I break it down. What would I do or what would I want to know when faced with one of these problems?
One is action versus reaction. The notion of action versus reaction that we must understand is that the bad guy always has the jump on us.
I see something and then I respond to it, understanding what it is. And those are called reaction intervals. And if you overlay that with the OODA loop, that if you are a threat to me, I have a certain number of reaction intervals I have to do.
Bad guy has already set up an observed, oriented, and decided when to strike us. They're just waiting to act. And that acronym is called an OODA loop: observe, orient, decide, and act.
You present threatening behavior towards me, I have to understand that there is threatening behavior coming towards me. That's one reaction interval. For the average trained individual to respond to a threat requires about 1.5 seconds.
That's an eternity in a firefight. It doesn't sound like much, but that's a big jump.
How far can the average person run in about 1.5 seconds? 21 feet, 25 feet.
Preparation and practice. Be prepared. Practice what you are thinking. Know where your exits are. Know where your entrances are. Know the other employees around you. Report suspicious behavior immediately.
Our decision that action versus reaction is often clouded by disbelief. Oh my gosh, is this really happening to me?
There's no need to panic when you're faced with a situation. You know what is going on, you know how to control, and you can deal with.
So that's the first lesson there.
The more information you have, the more data you collect and your ability to process it, the better decisions you're going to make.
Once you've realized that you need to take some action, you need to get out, to escape. But you've got to evacuate yourself out of the danger area. You've got to move, and you've got to do that first. You have a family, you have friends.
Wait and see is not an option, because the more time you give a shooter, the more damage they're going to do. The mission of an active shooter is killing and executing people for no reason at all, with no worries about their own self-preservation or life.
It tells us that force is going to be required to stop this person. The odds of you having the force to do that are minimal. If you're sitting in an office, you are not prepared for that. You will be under a huge amount of stress when this occurs. So remember, run, hide, fight.
During an active shooting event, there is going to be a time that police arrive. Whether it's 14 minutes or under or 14 minutes or later, they are going to show up. And when they do, there's some procedures that you need to follow. The first one you need to remember is you need to remain as calm as possible as you exit the building or as you're outside talking to the officers with as much information as possible, because they're responding to the report of someone firing a gun, and they don't know if that's you or someone else.
Your body is going to physiologically respond as it should, which is in a life-threatening event. Your pulse will go through the roof, your pupils will dilate, you'll start to sweat. You've probably read that you may have involuntary bowel movements. You may want to freeze, which is why we spend so much time telling you you've got to move. But then once it's over, well, you all of a sudden have this huge response to being safe. Some of that may be talking. Some of that may just being wanting to go up and talk to the policeman, touch the policeman, likely to get you into serious trouble.
Ever since the shooting at Columbine, the response tactics of police have transformed tremendously. Where they would used to show up, surround, create a perimeter, and call SWAT, now there's a less traditional approach.
We had mass casualties, we had propane tanks that went off. The children, I mean, they're ingrained in our minds, the children walking across the field with their hands up. And now, of course, we've got the tragedy in Connecticut, the most recent one.
Now the police show up. When the second or third police officer shows up on scene, they are entering your building. They're not there to repair the damage or fix the casualties. Even the people that are reaching out to them, please help me, they are there to stop the threat, which is the active shooter.
It's hard words, but it kind of drives the point home. Our job is to save lives. The ones that are injured, they're either going to survive or they're going to die. But why risk 50 more kids by stopping your advancement? In order to help these people, we've got to stop the threat. We've got to stop the threat or isolate it.
Preparation, practice.